Hello, welcome to Tasteful Talks with Just Sex Tay. I'm your host Shantae Green, and today we're going to be talking about the heart of a servant. So let's just jump right in. I'm going to be reading from Philippians chapter 2, starting at verse 3. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility consider others as more important than yourselves. Everyone should look out not only for his own interests, but also the interests of others. Adopt the same attitude as that of Christ Jesus, who, existing in the form of God, did not consider equality with God as something to be exploited. Instead, he amplified himself by assuming the form of a servant, taking on the likeness of humanity. And when he had come as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even as death on the cross. For this reason, God highly exalted him and gave him the name that is above every name, and so that the name of Jesus, every knee in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. So, as I said, I'm going to be talking about the heart of a servant. A servant heart means to have a mindset or a desire to selfishly or sacrificially serve others, regardless of your feelings towards them or what it may have cost you. Serving was never a threat to Jesus because he never lost sight of who he was. He knew his position with the Father. When you know who you are, a son or daughter of God, rendering service won't be a problem. It is when you don't know who you are that serving becomes a problem. And when you are unsure of your identity, you will fear that serving is beneath you and that you will somehow be taken advantage of serving. Jesus knew who he was, and he paid the ultimate price when he sacrificed his life and died on the cross. He never lost sight of who he was. He always knew that his first thing was to be a servant. Sometimes we lose sight of who we are when we take on these titles, and we must realize that being a servant, we truly have to have the spirit of humility. Being a servant isn't about always about being the titles. A lot of people get caught up in titles, but when you truly understand what it means to be a servant, your motives will be pure even when people mistreat you. But we must understand that serving is about honoring and pleasing God, even at the point, even at the cost of being hurt. And sometimes a lot of people don't want to serve. They feel like serving is beneath you. But the first thing before God called you to anything, you are a servant first. Serving is something that we should always take as something honorable. Some people don't feel serving is an honorable place, but God called us all to be servants. We are servants before he calls us to be in these positions. I know in Ephesians, it talks the fivefold ministries where he calls some apostles, he calls some to be preachers, pastors, teachers, and all those things. But God said he don't want you to lose sight of what you are first called to do, is to be a servant. And a lot of people have lost sight of being a servant. We have got caught up in the titles to the first love, and the first love is being a servant. I called you first to be a servant. There are so many people that God said you are caught up in the positions of where you are that you don't even really remember what I called you to do first is to be a servant, to be humble, to be in that place where you want to serve, but you want people to serve you. But God said, where are you at as a servant? You have got so caught up in the positions that I placed you in. You forgot the spirit of being the heart of being a true servant. And I want to give you the some characteristics of being a servant. Developing the heart of a servant. Knowing your unique ministry is the vital part of serving others. The second vital part is developing your servant's heart. You must have the heart of a servant for two reasons. It prevents you from feeling tempted to use your abilities and gifts for your personal benefits rather than service. It will urge you to answer God's call to service, even when the call is for something you're not particularly gifted at, While your main focus is your unique ministry, your second focus is any call to service. Someone who doesn't have the heart of his servant only calls for the main ministry and selfishly ignores God calls for other type of service. A servant heart is made up of who you are and how you feel, and a combination of characteristics and attitude that lend themselves to serving others. The heart of a servant has five. The first one is availability. Keep your schedule unburdened enough to be able to answer the call to service when it comes, or being willing to put aside less important matters to answer the call. As a servant, you must be willing to let God interfere with your schedule as he needs to. Those who are only serving when they feel like it or when it's convenient aren't true servants. Some people might not want to hear that. Characteristic number 2, perceptiveness. True servants also look for ways that they may be able to serve others and take opportunities as soon as they spot them. You need perception and flexibility to fulfill the characteristic. Perception helps you to sense when someone needs your help, even when it's not immediately clear. Flexibility is necessary because moments to reach out to those who need help usually pass very quickly. So you need to be flexible enough to seize the moment without thinking about your schedule. To work on your servant's perception and flexibility, make a point to looking at small, unnoticeable tasks that need to be done. For example, you might rake your elders' neighbors' leaves while they are out, or stay after a committee meeting to clean up the room. Some people don't like those little things. Some people, if they're not on a big stage or platform serving, those little small things, cleaning a church or doing other things, they think that's beneath them. But God says serving, any form of serving, is not too small. It's not beneath you. Some people feel like, oh, well, I'm up here now, so I can't do this. God said you should never allow your title to get so great and so big that you think that doing these things are beneath you. Characteristic number 3, dedication. True servants always do the best they can now, no matter the circumstances. They don't wait for better timing or better tools. They don't make excuses. They use whatever they have and jump right into their work. This is because they understand that thoughts don't count as service. Imperfect service is much better than thoughts of service that never gets carried out. You may be hesitating to serve or waiting for a better time because you think you have nothing worthy to offer. There are 2 arguments that can help you get out of the mindset. God doesn't care about perfection. He can use any sort of service you put out into the world, but he can't use your thoughts of service. Everyone has a learning curve, and the first attempt at service aren't always the best. The only way you can improve is by practicing. I talk about service. Gave me the heart of a servant, because I serve in my church as my first lady armor bearer. And to have the heart of a servant, your heart must be pure. You cannot have any hidden agendas, any hidden motives to make you feel like, if I serve, what am I going to gain out of serving? Or what is this going to take me to if I serve? When I started serving, I served in my former pastor church, which was my former bishop. I served his wife, Mother Elnora Thomas, as her armor bearer. That was my first call to serving. And when God laid it on my heart to ask her to come to that level of serving, it was her armor bearer who helped me learn of serving. That where I'm able to serve now in my other church as my first lady. You learn so many different things of serving. Serving is not about being seen. It's not about accolades or anything like that. Some people, when they serve, they want to be acknowledged, and you have to learn sometimes you don't get acknowledged for the service that you give. The acknowledgement comes from God. When he sees that you serve from a pure place and heart, that he acknowledges you, he gives you those things that you feel like sometimes people might take you for granted. They might neglect the things that you do. They might not say thank you. They might not do these things. But God said, when you serve from a pure place, God said, I get the glory out of that. Not man, but me, because you're doing it to the glory and honor of God. And the fourth characteristic is reliability. When you're serving, you have to be dependable. They do what they say they will. Whether it's a task they need to get done or a promise they need to keep. In a world where it seems to be increasingly difficult to get to people to stick to their commitment, servants are steadfastly trustworthy and reliable. The characteristic number 5 is humility. Service servants Servants don't need to be noticed or praised for their service, like I just said. They do humble service and don't go out of their way to get attention for it. If they do get praise, they acknowledge it, but don't let it change the way they serve or get into the way of it. Sometimes I've seen that people serve. Oh, God. They only want to serve, like I said, when they know they're going to get noticed or acknowledged for serving. God said that's not the heart of a servant. The heart of a true servant is when you serve when you don't get acknowledged for it, when you serve to the best of your ability, when you see things done. Sometimes serving might cause you to serve late hours. It might cause you to do things that you never thought that you were going to do. God said, I'm looking for a true heart, the trueness of a servant. Some people have got lost sight of what it means to be a true servant. And God said, I'm calling you back. Where are the true servants at? Where are your heart? Where are the pure heart of the servants? God said, I'm calling you back to me. God said, a lot of you have lost sight what it truly means to have a heart of a servant. God said he's tired of seeing you use your titles and positions, and you lost sight what it truly means to be a true servant, to really have the heart of a servant. The heart of a servant has 5 attitudes, and I'm going to give you the first one. Others' needs first. Think about others' needs before thinking about your own. When your own needs aren't the center of focus, you easily avoid the mistake of consciously and unconsciously participate in service for selfish reasons. If you were serving with an attitude of my needs first, you might volunteer for a position that is spotlight and let you inform everyone of the candidate for outreach committee. If you were serving with the heart of a servant and the attitude of other needs first, you're more likely look for where help is needed more, even in the position isn't prominent. Like I said, I serve as an armor bearer, and some people look at it is they want. Some people might be jealous of the positions that you have because they feel like, oh, I want to do this, but they don't know. Serving as an armor bearer, that's a serious ministry because you have to be prayerful. You have to be watchful. There are so many levels of an armor bearer that you have to have. And sometimes when your leaders or who you serve are going through and you serve to the closest to them, you endure some things that they endure, some of sickness, some afflictions. Some if they're under spiritually attacked, you come under spiritually attacked because you serve with them. That's when you have to really be in a prayerful place. When you have to cover your leaders, you have to pray for them. You have to have a true heart of a servant so you can what they're going through. But when you have that close connection, with them, God will show you in prayer, hey, you need to get in your prayer for your posture place, because this is what you need to pray for your leader concerning when when they haven't even came to you. So serving heart, you have to be in a pure mindset, in a pure place when you are serving. It's not about titles all the time. And God said you have to get out of the mindset of being caught up in titles. Some people say, oh, hey, some people may call me evangelist, some people may call me prophet, but I don't worry about titles. I worry about being a true servant. I want to keep a servant's heart. My heart is after God. I want to seek God like never before. I want to be in that place, because at the end of the day, when you see God's face, it's not about him saying, well done, thy good and faithful prophetess. Well done, thy good and faithful evangelist. Well done, thy good and faithful pastor. It's well done, thy good and faithful servant. That is what you want to hear God say. Well done, thy good and faithful servant. God said, I'm looking for the pure ones that have a heart of a servant, who are willing to serve me with a pure heart, who's not about the titles. God said, it is time to get out of being caught up in these titles and position. God said, I'm after the pure hearts, who is willing to serve me with no hidden agendas, who's not being recognized if your name is not called. God said, I'm calling you back to the heart of a servant. Oh God, some of us have gotten too caught up in these titles. And God said, I did call you to be that. God said, I did call you to be that. But God said, you've allowed this title to just be taking you control over you. And God said, you lost the pureness of the heart of a servant. And God said, I'm calling you back to the pureness of the heart of a servant. God said, I need the pureness of your heart back of serving. We've gotten too caught up with these titles and these positions. And God said, I'm after the true heart of a servant. That don't care if you don't call me prophetess, that don't care if you don't say bishop, who don't care if you don't call me by my title. But at the end of the day, you want to hear him say, well done, thy good and faithful servant. That's who God said, I've called you to be a servant. I'm not negating the fivefold ministries, because God did call you to be that. But God said some of you have allowed these titles to go to your head, that you lost the pureness of the heart of a servant. And God said, I'm calling you back to the pureness of a heart of the servant, to serve me with your pure heart, that's not going to be just so caught up in the titles. Today, I urge and I plead with you to come back to the pureness of a heart of a servant. Don't worry about the titles. God said, yes, I did call you to that. But God said, don't get so caught up in the titles that you lose the essence and the pureness of a heart of a servant. Because God said, I called you to serve. I called you to serve. I called you to serve. And God said some of us has lost the pureness of a heart of a servant. And always remind my first lady, hey, I serve you with a pure heart, with no hidden agendas. Whatever door God opens for me, God opens it. But my first call to ministry is to serve the heart of a servant. The heart of a servant. Even doing this, it's a heart of a servant. I didn't never want to do this. But God said, I called you to serve. I called you to serve. This is a servant heart, giving you what God said. It's not about titles. It's about serving. And God said, don't get caught up in the titles. Some of you have truly got caught up in the titles. And God said, I'm calling you back to a pure heart of a servant. God said we can no longer get lost in these titles, because these titles are getting above who he is. Because God said there is no name above my name. I have the greatest name above all names. And at the end of the day, every knee shall bow and every tongue shall confess that he is Lord. God said, I am above all names. So you cannot get caught up in the titles that I gave you and lose the pure essence of a servant. I seen how some people treat people with these titles, and God said you have lost sight of who you truly are as a servant at heart. And God said it's time to come back to the pure essence of a servant. So I plead with you to come back to the pureness of a servant's heart. You got to have the heart of a servant like never before. God said, I'm urging you. I'm pleading with you to come back to the pureness in the heart of a servant. Yes, I called you to that. Yes, I called you pastor. Yes, I called you bishop. Yes, I called you evangelist. But some of you have lost sight of a true heart of a servant. Yes, God. So today, I plead with you to get back to the pureness heart of a servant. Get back to the essence, to the humility of a servant. God said, I'm calling you back to the pureness in the heart of a servant. So today, I want to thank you. God, I thank you. This was hard. I struggled with wanting to do this. I did this heart of a servant on a conference call that I was on, and that's what God gave me to talk about that. And as I wanted to come back and prepare for my next live, God told me to come on this platform because he said the world needs to hear this, the heart of a servant. And as I'm going to give you more to say, and I was really nervous about doing this, but I remember what my pastor said. You got to answer the call. You got to give them more. And I struggle with this because I know some people, guys, some people are not going to like what I have to say. Some people with these on these higher platforms, God, but I can't worry any longer about what people might say, because at the end of the day, I truly want to hear him say, well done, thy good and faithful servant. And that's what a lot of you need to be concerned with at the end of the day, that you've done everything, how you treated this person, what you said to them, that you get it right. Because God said, I need you to have the pure and essence heart of a servant. You can no longer mishandle and treat people because you feel like you're up here and you mistreat people, you belittle them, you talk down on them. God said that's not representing who I am. That's not representing the pure heart of a servant. God said, I didn't give you that position so you can mistreat people. God said, you got to get back to the pure essence of the heart of a servant and who I called you to be. And I gave you that position, but I didn't give it to you to mishandle and mistreat the people of God. Because if you're going to reach the world and you're going to reach those out there, they got to see how you serve as the pure heart of a servant to me. God said, I didn't call you to mishandle the people and to mistreat them and talk down on them. God said, that's not what I called you for. That's not what I gave you that position to be. God said, it's time to get back to the pureness of a servant, the heart of a servant. So it's time to get back to the heart of a servant. Yeah, we may not do everything right. And we have to get it in alignment and ask for forgiveness when we know we might not have did things right or operated right. And we have to ask the Father to forgive us. Or we might have to ask that person who we offended or who we not treated right in serving to forgive us. Because you never want to misrepresent who God is in serving in a position that he gave you. Because it's all about pleasing God. Because like I said, at the end of the day, you want to hear him say, well done, thy good and faithful servant. So I hope I have said something today that help someone to know that if you feel like pure place or that heart of a servant like you used to be, I hope this word today has urged you to show you that you need to get back in alignment with the pure heart of serving in your ministry, in the church, even if it's outside the church. Whatever you're doing as servant, do it from the pureness of your heart, not about being recognized. Because the recognition is great. It is great when people recognize you, what you do. But God said at the end of the day, it's not about the recognition. It's about you doing it from the pureness of your heart of serving, from the pureness of your heart. And a lot of people have lost sight of that, because that's all I want to hear him say at the end of the day. Well done, thy good and faithful servant. That's what we should be wanting in this time, is to hear him say, well done, thy good and faithful servant. So once again, I thank you for joining me with Tasteful Talks with Just Ask Tay. I'll probably be back one more time before the year is out, whatever the Lord say. Once again, thank you for joining me with Tasteful Talk with Just Ask Tay. Peace and blessings. I love you. Let's get back to the pureness of God. Let's remember to serve, to have a heart of a servant like never before. Peace and blessings. I love you. Bye.